Jake Lawson, 38, was the kind of man who smelled faintly of motor oil, even on Sunday mornings. He owned a modest auto shop in a quiet Ohio town where everyone knew everyone else's business. His garage was a haven of organized chaos, old pickups in various states of repair, dusty tool chests, and a faint hum of the radio in the background. Most days, Jake's hands were stained with grease before the sun had fully risen. He loved his work, not because it made him rich, but because it gave him purpose. He fixed what was broken, and that to him was enough. It was late autumn, the kind of chilly afternoon where breath fogged in the air and fallen leaves clung stubbornly to the wet pavement. Jake was leaning under the hood of an old Ford truck when he heard the shop door creak open. He glanced up briefly and noticed a small figure at the entrance. A little girl sat in a wheelchair, bundled in a light jacket that looked a size too big. She had curious brown eyes that seemed to study every movement he made, and strands of hair escaping her ponytail framed her pale face. Her mother stepped inside, shaking the cold off her coat, and approached the counter to pay for an oil change. But the girl didn't follow. She stayed by the door, her attention fixed entirely on Jake as he tightened a bolt and wiped his hands on a rag. He gave her a friendly smile, but she only looked down shyly before glancing. Back at the shiny chrome tools hanging neatly on the wall, there was something in her gaze, not just curiosity, but longing, as if she wanted to be part of that world. When her mother finished at the counter, she called, "Mia, time to go." The girl wheeled forward a few feet and then stopped, turning to Jake. "I like cars," she said quietly, almost as if testing whether he would take her seriously. Jake set his rag down and crouched to her level. "You like cars, huh? Well, that makes two of us," he said with a grin. Mia hesitated before adding, "I've never been able to drive, but maybe one day." Her voice held no bitterness, just a wistful hope that tugged at Jake's chest in a way he didn't expect. That night, long after he had locked up and the street outside had gone quiet, Jake found himself unable to shake the image of Mia's face. He could still hear her voice in his mind, that mixture of shyness and quiet courage. He sat at his workbench with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the pile of spare parts he had been meaning to sort. An idea began to form, one that made his heart beat a little faster. What if he could make something for her, something that would give her the experience of driving, even if she couldn't use her legs? He grabbed a notepad from a drawer and began to sketch. His pencil moved quickly, guided by a mix of inspiration and determination. The design wasn't for a regular car, but for a small, battery-powered vehicle, something she could control entirely with her hands. He envisioned bright colors, soft seating, and easy-to-use controls. It had to be safe, light, and joyful. In his mind, he could already see Mia's expression when she first saw it. That thought alone kept him drawing until nearly midnight, the clock on the wall ticking softly in the background. Over the next few days, Jake began quietly gathering parts. He found a small electric motor he had salvaged from a mobility scooter last year, wheels from an old go-kart, and a box of bolts and wiring that had been sitting in the corner. He decided on a bright pink paint job, something cheerful and unmistakable. Each night after closing, he stayed late in the garage, the hum of his tools echoing into the quiet streets. His hands worked with a precision born from years of both mechanical skill and a growing sense of purpose. The body frame was made from lightweight aluminum tubing, welded carefully to support the seat without adding unnecessary weight. Jake cushioned the seat with foam padding, covering it in a durable, weather-resistant fabric. The steering was adapted to be entirely hand-operated, no pedals, just levers and buttons within easy reach. The battery pack was tucked neatly under the seat, with safety fuses installed to prevent overheating. Every step of the process was deliberate, every piece chosen with Mia's comfort and safety in mind. By the second week, the little car was taking shape. Jake often found himself smiling as he worked, imagining how far She might drive it, maybe around her driveway, or down the quiet neighborhood street. One evening, as he smoothed the final coat of bright pink paint, he carefully stenciled Maya in silver letters across the hood. It wasn't just decoration, it was a declaration that this was hers, built with no one else in mind. That name shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights, and Jake felt a strange warmth in his chest. On the third week's Friday, after giving the minicar its last safety check, Jake decided it was time. He called Mia's mother and asked if they could stop by the shop. When the door opened that afternoon, Mia wheeled herself inside, looking curious. Jake gestured for her to follow him out. Back, where the little car sat waiting in the sunlight, for a moment she just stared, then her eyes widened and her mouth opened in disbelief. Is that for me?" she whispered. Jake nodded, fighting the urge to get emotional. "Every bolt, every screw, just for you." Mia's mother covered her mouth, clearly struggling not to cry, as Jake carefully lifted Mia into the seat. He explained the controls, showing her how the hand levers worked. Tentatively, she pressed forward and the motor hummed to life. The car rolled ahead smoothly, and Mia's laughter rang out light, unrestrained and full of pure joy. Neighbors who happened to be nearby stopped to watch, smiling as the little pink car zipped in a small circle and back again. For Jake, no paycheck or recognition could ever match that moment. As Mia took another lap, her mother stepped beside Jake. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "I know," Jake replied, his eyes still following the little car. "But I wanted to." And deep down, he knew that this simple act, a few weeks of late nights, some spare parts, and a little determination had created something far bigger than he could yet understand. 3 weeks of late nights, scraped knuckles, and careful painting had finally come to this moment. Jake stood in the doorway of his garage, hands resting on the steering wheel of the bright pink mini car. The silver letters spelling MIA gleamed under the early afternoon sun. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps on the gravel as Mia and her mother approached. His heart pounded, not with nerves about whether the car would work, but with the hope that this would bring a kind of joy the little girl had been missing for too long. When Mia saw it, she froze. Her small hands clutched the sides of her wheelchair as her eyes widened in disbelief. Jake waved her over with a smile, trying to act casual even though his stomach felt like it was full of fireflies. "What do you think?" he asked gently. Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is that for me?" Jake nodded, crouching beside her. "Every bolt, every brushstroke, it's all yours." Her lips curled into the kind of smile that could melt the coldest winter. Jake carefully slid his arms beneath her, lifting her into the padded seat he had measured and shaped specifically for her comfort. The car fit her like it was made for her, because it was. He explained the end controls, showing her how to push forward to move and pull back to slow down. She touched them as if afraid they might disappear. Her mother stood nearby, one hand over her mouth, her eyes already glistening. The whole scene felt like something from a dream. With a small nod from Jake, Mia pressed the forward lever. The electric motor purred softly, and the car began to roll. At first, it was just a slow crawl, but as Mia grew braver, the wheels spun faster, carrying her across the sunlit lot. Her laughter erupted, bright and contagious, ringing out through the quiet afternoon. Jake stood with his hands in his pockets, grinning like a proud big brother, watching her zip around like she'd been doing it her whole life. Neighbors began to notice the commotion. Mr. Harris from across the street wandered over, leaning on his cane with a curious smile. Mrs. Patel from the bakery next door stepped outside, wiping flour from her hands. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, their murmurs mixing with Mia's laughter. Some clapped, some simply stood in awe. Everyone could see what Jake had done, not just build a toy, but give a child something she thought she could never have. Mia's mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Jake, we can't possibly repay you for this," He waved her off. It's not about payment. It's about giving her what she deserves, freedom, fun, and the chance to feel like any other kid. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. You don't understand. No one's ever done something like this for us before. You've changed her life. Jake didn't know what to say. All he could do was glance back at Mia, still beaming as she made another slow lap. The sunlight glinted off the car's fresh paint as the breeze carried the smell of motor oil and sawdust from the garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was perfect. Jake thought about the long nights hunched over the workbench, about the times he'd wondered if he could even finish on time. Every blister, every moment of frustration, every dollar he'd spent on parts he couldn't really afford, it all vanished into the background. In this moment, there was only the sound of her laughter and the knowledge that it had all been worth it. Mia stopped the car near Jake, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Can I try it again tomorrow?" she asked eagerly. Jake chuckled. "You can drive it every day if you want. Just don't forget to charge the battery." She nodded solemnly, as if he'd given her an important responsibility. The crowd chuckled softly. A few people took photos, capturing the sight of the little pink car under the small-town sun, knowing they were witnessing something rare and beautiful. Her mother bent down, embracing Mia tightly. "You look so happy," she whispered. "I am," Mia replied without hesitation. She looked up at Jake. "This is the best day ever." The words hit him, harder than he expected. He had built plenty of machines in his life engines, furniture, even an old boat, but this was different. This was something that reached beyond bolts and wires. He had built a piece of her childhood back, one she thought she'd never get to have. As the afternoon light began to fade, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the warmth in the air lingered. Jake wheeled the mini car back into the garage, promising Mia it would be ready for her whenever she wanted. She gave him a small wave before her mother wheeled her away down the gravel path, the sound of her voice still, light with laughter. Jake stood in the doorway long after they'd gone, the smell of the fresh paint and the quiet hum of the motor still in his mind. Inside, he leaned against his workbench, letting the quiet settle in. The garage felt different now, not just a place for fixing and repairing, but a place where dreams could be built. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt a strange certainty that this wasn't the end of the story. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that acts like this had a way of rippling outward, in touching lives he hadn't even met yet. He just didn't know how quickly that ripple would return to his own doorstep. 4 days after Mia's first ride, Jake was bent over an old pickup's engine when he heard a deep, steady rumble, not the usual sound of rusty farm trucks that came through town. The noise grew louder until it stopped right outside his garage. Jake straightened, wiping grease from his hands, and stepped to the doorway. There, in sharp contrast to his dusty surroundings, sat a gleaming black limousine, polished so perfectly it reflected the pale morning sun like a mirror. It looked like it had no business in this little Ohio town. The driver stepped out first, crisp black suit, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He walked briskly to the rear door and opened it. Out stepped a tall man in an expensive, charcoal gray suit, his shoes shining like they'd never touched dirt. His hair was streaked with silver, and his presence carried the quiet authority of someone used to boardrooms and big decisions. He scanned the garage, then fixed his eyes on Jake. "Jake Lawson?" he asked. Jake nodded cautiously. "I'm Daniel Harper, Mia's uncle." Jake's mind raced. He had never met Mia's extended family, but he had heard from her mother that her brother lived far away and was busy with work. Busy, Jake now realized, was a polite way of saying very wealthy. Daniel stepped closer, a faint smile softening his otherwise serious face. "I heard what you did for Mia," he said. "My sister told me everything." Jake shrugged modestly. "It was nothing. Just something I could do." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "It wasn't nothing, Mr. Lawson. It was extraordinary." Without much more conversation, Daniel reached into his suit jacket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out. Jake hesitated before taking it, the thick paper feeling strange in his calloused hands. Inside was a check. Jake blinked, his brain stumbling over the string of zeros. He had never seen that many digits attached to his name in his life. Daniel's voice was steady. "This isn't charity," he said firmly. "This is an investment. I want you to build more cars like Mia's, for every child who needs one." For a moment, Jake didn't speak. The thought of scaling up his little after-hours project into something that could help dozens, maybe hundreds of kids was overwhelming. He imagined garages full of tools, shelves stacked with parts, and rows of bright custom cars waiting for children to climb in. I don't know what to say," Jake admitted. Daniel's smile returned, faint but genuine. "Then don't say anything yet, just start building." He clapped Jake lightly on the shoulder before stepping back toward the limousine. The vehicle pulled away, leaving a cloud of disbelief in its wake. Jake stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside and placing the check on his workbench. He stared at it like it might disappear if he blinked too long. His garage smelled of oil and sawdust, the same as always, but suddenly it felt different, like it had just become the center of something, far bigger than he had ever dreamed. The air seemed heavier with possibility. Within days, word began to spread. It started with Mia's mother telling her friends, then with neighbors mentioning it at the bakery and the post office. By the end of the week, the local paper ran a small article about the mechanic changing lives one car at a time. That's when the phone started ringing. Parents from neighboring towns called, asking if Jake could make something for their kids. Some offered to pay, others simply asked for a chance. Each story came with its own weight, each child's name carving its place into Jake's mind. The first donation outside of Daniel's came from Mrs. Patel, who dropped off an envelope of cash wrapped in a note that read, "For the kids." Then Mr. Harris brought over some unused plywood from his shed. Soon, strangers were stopping by, handing over spare parts, tools, and even meals so Jake could keep working. Late, the dusty garage became a hive of activity, its walls echoing with the sound of saws, drills, and the occasional burst of laughter from visiting kids trying out their new rides. Jake began designing new models cars, painted in bright reds, blues, and yellows, each fitted with unique controls tailored to the child's needs. Some were designed to be operated entirely by hand levers, others with joystick controls for kids with limited mobility. He even started experimenting with built-in sound systems so the kids could play their favorite songs while driving. Every delivery day became a small celebration, complete with neighbors clapping, cameras flashing, and parents wiping away tears. By the third month, Jake's little garage could no longer keep up with demand. That's when Daniel returned, not in a limousine this time, but in a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "You're going to need more space," he said, surveying the cluttered workshop. Within weeks, Daniel had arranged for a larger facility in the next town over a bright, airy space with proper ventilation, heavy duty, workbenches and room for volunteers to join in. "This is your headquarters now," Daniel told him. "Make it count." Volunteers came from everywhere, high school shop students, retired mechanics, even a few local artists who painted custom designs on the cars. Parents brought their kids to try out new prototypes, and the sound of little motors whirring became the music of the workshop. Each finished car was more than just a vehicle. It was a ticket to independence, a symbol that said, "You can too." Jake found himself spending less time fixing old pickups and more time building futures for kids who had been told no too many times. One afternoon, as he was tightening the last bolt on a deep blue car with silver flames, Jake realized something. This had grown far beyond him. The project now had sponsors, a mailing list, and even a name, Wheels of Freedom. The logo, painted by a local art student, showed a smiling child in a wheelchair with wings sprouting from the back. The first time Jake saw it on the workshop wall, he had to step outside for a moment to catch his breath. This wasn't just his dream anymore. It belonged to everyone who had believed in it. Months later, Jake stood in the middle of the bustling shop, watching a group of volunteers put finishing touches on a set of new cars destined for kids in California, Texas, and Maine. Daniel walked up beside him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You know," Daniel said, "this all started because you decided to help one kid." Jake nodded slowly. "One kid and 1 pink car." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as a little boy tested a shiny green car in the parking lot, his laughter echoing against the workshop walls. Jake thought back to that first day Mia drove across the lot, her joy lighting up the grey afternoon. He remembered how simple it had felt, just doing the right thing because he could. He had no idea then that it would ripple out like this, touching lives across the country. The check from Daniel had started it, but the real fuel had been the community's belief, the parents' trust, and the kids' unstoppable smiles. It was proof that a single act of kindness really could set wheels in motion, not just for one child, but for countless others yet to come.